Sarah May Hawkins had never begged in her life, but that evening, with her stomach aching from hunger and her hands shaking from fear, she dropped to her knees in front of the hardest man anyone knew. The ranch hands called him Jed Stone, and they spoke his name the way people speak about storms. He stood tall and still, with an axe in his hand and a face that looked carved from rock. Sarah lifted her chin, even though tears burned her eyes, and she said the only honest thing she had left. She told him she was not worth much, but she could cook. One small sentence, spoken in desperation, and everything in her life began to turn. Only days earlier, Sarah was still living in a small cabin that felt like safety. She was 31, still young enough to believe pain would pass. Then her husband died without warning, taking her heart with him. She buried him with shaking hands, barely able to stand. She thought grief would be the worst of it. She was wrong. A few mornings after the burial, men in dark coats came to her door holding papers. They did not offer comfort. They offered cold words and hard laws. Her husband, the man she trusted, had left behind debts so large they sounded unreal. He had borrowed money for deals that failed and signed his name on promises he could not keep. Now the creditors said the cabin and everything inside belonged to them. Sarah tried to explain she knew nothing about it. She told them she never signed a thing. The man with dark glasses did not care. He told her marriage made her responsible. He gave her 1 week to leave. Then, without mercy, they began marking her life like it was nothing more than a list. Furniture, blankets, tools, even the little keepsakes that held her family's history. They took it all. When the week ended, Sarah walked away with nothing but a small bundle. In the middle of the chaos, she saved 3 things the creditors did not want. An old skillet blackened from years of use, a cracked clay pot that once belonged to her grandmother, and a wooden spoon worn smooth by the hands that used it before hers. They were not worth money, but they were all she had left of the life she lost. She walked the trail with grief sitting heavy in her chest. The days were hot and dry. Dust stuck to her skin. Her boots rubbed her feet raw, but she did not stop because stopping felt like dying. The first night she slept under an oak tree, with the stars watching like silent strangers. She listened to the dark sounds of the world and tried not to imagine what could find a lone woman on an empty trail. The second day she drank from a creek and ate wild berries she recognized. Her body felt weak, but something inside her refused to quit. By the third day, the sun was dropping low and painting the sky orange when she saw a small frontier settlement ahead. Her heart lifted with a small, desperate hope. People meant work. Work meant food. Food meant life. The settlement was dusty and tired. Chickens wandered between buildings. A thin dog slept under a porch like it had given up on expecting kindness. Sarah wiped her face, straightened her torn dress, and started knocking on doors. She spoke politely, even though shame clawed at her throat. She told them her name. She said she could cook biscuits, stew, roasts, anything they needed. She asked for only a roof and food in return for honest work. One by one, doors closed on her. Some people did not even let her finish speaking. A woman looked her up and down like she was filth and told her to leave. A man said he did not hire strangers. An elderly woman crossed herself like Sarah carried a curse. The words hurt more than the hunger. Sarah was not asking for charity. She was offering work. But the town saw only a ragged stranger, and fear was louder than compassion. When she had knocked on every door and the last light began to fade, Sarah sat in the small plaza where a dry fountain stood like a forgotten promise. Her stomach growled so hard it made her dizzy. She went to the general store with the last coins in her pocket and bought a tiny handful of beans. That was all she could afford. She stepped back outside and looked around the empty square. She could feel the night coming, cold and dangerous. She knew she could not sleep hungry again. Not if she wanted to survive. So she did something that made people stare. She gathered dry twigs and stones and built a small fire right there in public. She filled her cracked clay pot with water from the well and poured in the beans. Then she opened a little cloth bag she had guarded like treasure. Inside were dried herbs and spices from better days. Simple things, but precious. Thyme, bay leaf, salt, pepper, dried garlic. Her hands moved with the calm skill of someone who had fed people she loved. As the beans simmered, the smell began to rise. It was not the smell of poverty. It was the smell of a home. It drifted through the air and turned heads. Sarah stirred slowly with her worn wooden spoon, and for the first time in days she felt something like dignity return. She had lost her cabin, her family things, her place in the world, but she still knew how to make food with care. She still knew how to offer comfort. An old man with white hair and a bent back came toward her, leaning on a wooden stick. His eyes were sharp and curious. He stopped beside the fire and breathed in the scent like it was a memory. "That smells mighty fine," he said softly. Sarah looked up and saw kindness in his face. It startled her, like sunlight after too many storms. She told him it was only beans, made with what little she had. The old man asked if he could sit, and she nodded. When the beans were ready, she shared them with him, even though she was hungry enough to cry. He took one bite, and his face changed. Tears slid down his cheeks as he chewed slowly. He told her it had been 12 years since his wife died, and no one had cooked for him with love since then. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She did not know this man, but his words made her feel seen again. He asked how she ended up cooking in the plaza like she had nowhere else to go. And for the first time since she lost everything, Sarah told the truth. She spoke of her husband's death, the hidden debts, the men who took her home, and the doors that slammed in her face. The old man listened, without judgment. When she finished, he grew quiet. Then he told her the settlement was too fearful to give her a chance, but he knew a place 15 miles away, beyond the ridges, a mountain ranch owned by Jed Stone, a big spread with many hands. They needed a cook, he said, but warned her the owner was a hard man who had been broken by loss. Sarah clutched the small hope like it might slip away. She asked if he truly believed Jed Stone would take her. The old man looked at her as if the answer was already clear. "After tasting your cooking," he said, "I know you have something rare. Go while there is still light. Be humble, but stand firm. Let your food speak for you." Sarah packed her pot, skillet, and spoon. She swallowed fear, thanked the old man, and started walking again. The sky darkened, and the mountains rose ahead like shadows. Her feet burned inside her boots, but hope pushed her forward. Somewhere beyond those ridges waited a ranch, a man with a locked heart, and a single chance to change her fate. Sarah walked through the night, with the mountains watching over her like dark giants. The stars gave little light, and the trail was rough. But she kept going because the thought of turning back felt worse than any pain in her feet. She ate the small piece of cornbread the old man had given her, saving each bite like it mattered more than gold. Every step made her blisters sting, but hope kept her moving. By dawn, the sky turned pink and orange, and Sarah reached the fork in the trail the old man described. 2 paths opened in front of her. She chose the left without hesitation. After another long stretch, she finally saw it. Jed Stone's mountain ranch sat in a valley below, bigger than anything she expected. Fences stretched wide. Cattle moved slowly across the field. The barns looked strong and well-built, and the main house, made of logs and stone, stood like it had been planted there to last forever. Men were already working, feeding horses, hauling tools, shouting to each other as the morning began. Sarah stopped at the ridge and stared down, her heart beating hard enough to shake her chest. This could be her rescue, or it could be another door slamming in her face. She wiped her hands on her dress, straightened her shoulders, and walked down toward the gates. The ranch hands noticed her right away. They paused, squinting at the lone woman in torn clothes coming up the path like she had walked out of trouble itself. One man with a thick beard stepped forward. "Who are you?" he called. "What do you want here?" Sarah forced her voice to stay steady. "I'm looking for work. I heard you need a cook." A few men exchanged looks and let out short laughs like they had heard that before. "The boss ain't gonna want you," one said. "Cooks come and go, none lasts." Sarah did not flinch. "I'd still like to speak with him." Before anyone could answer, A deep voice cut through the air. "I'm right here." Sarah turned, and her breath caught. Jed Stone stood a few yards away holding an axe, his sleeves rolled up like he had been working with it. He was tall and broad, with a face set hard and eyes darker than the shadows under the barn roof. Gray touched his hair at the temples, but it did not soften him. His gaze moved over Sarah like he was counting every weakness, every flaw, every reason to send her away. "You looking for work?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Sarah said. "I heard you need a cook." Jed's mouth tightened. "You got experience?" "I do," Sarah said. "I cooked for my family for years. I can make biscuits, stews, meats, roasts. I can feed working men." Jed made a sound that could have meant nothing. Many women came here saying that. None lasted. "I don't accept poor cooking. I don't accept half-effort." Sarah swallowed and felt her throat tighten. She was tired, hungry, and scared. But she remembered the old man's words. "Be humble, but stand firm." "I understand," she said. "I'm not afraid of hard work. I just need one chance to show you what I can do." The ranch yard went quiet. The men watched, waiting to see if Jed would laugh or dismiss her. Jed stared at Sarah for a long moment like he was searching for something he could not name. Finally, he spoke. "You got 1 week," he said. 7 days. If the food's good, you stay. If it's mediocre, you leave. No arguing, no tears. My men need food that gives strength." Relief hit Sarah so hard she almost dropped to her knees again, but she caught herself. "Yes, sir," she said. "Thank you." Jed nodded once and called to a worker. "Buck, take her to the back room in the bunkhouse. Show her the kitchen and stores." Buck, a middle-aged man with a friendlier face than the others, motioned Sarah to follow. He led her past the corral and the main house to a small room behind the bunkhouse. Inside was a narrow bed, a little table with a crooked leg, and a stool. A window looked out toward the fields. "For what it is, it's clean," Buck said. Sarah stared like she was looking at a palace. "It's perfect," she said, and she meant it. Buck smiled. "Come on, I'll show you the kitchen." The kitchen was larger than Sarah expected, with a big wood stove, deep sinks, shelves filled with pots, and a long table worn smooth from years of work. The pantry held sacks of flour, beans, rice, dried meat, basic spices, eggs, butter, and vegetables from a garden out back. It was not endless, but it was enough. Enough to do real work. "The men eat at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 at night," Buck said. 18 hands, plus the boss. 19 mouths. "You sure you can handle that?" Sarah nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I can." That night, Sarah could not sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, feeling the pressure of that 1-week promise like a weight on her chest. If she failed, she would be back on the trail with nothing. But she also felt something she had not felt in a long time. Purpose. A reason to wake up and fight. Before sunrise, she was already moving. She washed her face in cold water, pulled her hair back into a tight bun, and tied on a clean apron she found in the kitchen. Her hands shook for a moment, then steadied as she set to work. She took stock of what she had, made quick decisions, and began preparing breakfast like her life depended on it. Because it did. She mixed biscuit dough and let it rise near the warmth of the stove. She chopped onion and garlic, then browned dried meat until it released its rich smell into the air. She beat eggs with a little milk and added a pinch of nutmeg she found hidden in the back of a cabinet, just enough to make the taste warmer without being strange. She brewed strong coffee, dark and steady, the kind that wakes a man up and keeps him on his feet through hard labor. When the biscuits came out, golden and puffed, Sarah let out a breath she did not realize she was holding. The ranch hands arrived hungry and half awake. They stepped into the dining area and stopped. The smell was different. Better. It hit them like a memory they did not know they missed. Sarah served plates with calm hands, placing biscuits, eggs, and meat in front of each man with quiet respect. Buck tasted first. He bit into a biscuit and froze. His eyes widened like he had just been struck by something. "Good Lord," he murmured, "this is incredible." That was all it took. The others began eating, and soon the room fell quiet. Not because the men were unhappy, but because they were too busy enjoying what was in front of them. Men who usually ate fast and barely noticed flavor now slowed down. They chewed like they were afraid the meal might vanish if they rushed it. "These biscuits are the best I ever had," one older hand said. "The eggs got something special," another muttered, scraping his plate clean. A younger worker laughed with genuine surprise. "If she cooks like this every day, I'll work twice as hard just to earn it." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but she kept her head up. The men liked it. She had done what she came here to do. But the real test was still waiting. Jed Stone did not eat with the others. He took breakfast alone in his study. Buck carried a tray to him each morning, and today would be the first. Sarah chose the best biscuits. She served the creamiest eggs and the richest meat. She poured coffee into the cleanest cup she could find. When Buck lifted the tray, he gave her a quick look, like he was rooting for her. "If he likes this," Buck whispered, "you might stay longer than a week." Sarah watched the tray disappear down the hall, and her heart pounded like a drum. Inside his study, Jed Stone sat at his desk with ledgers and papers spread out in front of him. Work kept his mind busy, and busy meant he did not have to feel. When Buck set the tray down, Jed barely looked up. "Leave it," he said, as if the food was nothing more than fuel. But then the smell reached him. Warm bread, savory meat, coffee that smelled alive. He paused, annoyed at himself for noticing, then reached for a biscuit, almost against his will. One bite stopped him cold. It was crisp outside, soft inside, rich with a flavor that came from careful hands. He tried the eggs, and something about them hit him like an old memory of a table that once felt full of laughter. Jed ate in silence until the plate was clean. That almost never happened. When he finished, he sat back and stared at the empty tray like it had just answered a question he never asked out loud. That woman, ragged and desperate at his gate, had walked into his ranch and changed something in one morning, and Sarah, waiting in the kitchen, did not know it yet, but the hardest part of her week was not going to be the cooking. It was going to be what her presence awakened inside the lone mountain man who had sworn he would never need anyone again. The next days moved fast, like the ranch had been waiting for Sarah without knowing it. She woke before the sun, lit the stove, and worked with steady hands. She made thick stews that warmed a man clear to his bones. She baked bread that filled the kitchen with a smell that pulled people in like a promise. She cooked beans until they were soft and rich, and she seasoned meat so it tasted like it was meant to be eaten, not just swallowed. She did not waste food, did not complain, and did not ask for special treatment. She just worked. The men changed because of it. They came to meals early, pretending they were just hungry but really wanting to smell what was cooking. They stopped rushing their plates. They started talking again, laughing again, like good food gave them back something they had been missing. Even the tired faces looked a little less hard. Buck told her the ranch had not felt this calm in years. Sarah listened, grateful, but she kept her eyes on the work. She still had to prove herself. A week was short, and Jed Stone was not the kind of man who handed out second chances. Jed stayed distant. He did not praise her in front of anyone. He did not smile. He did not even step into the dining room with the others. But every morning his tray came back empty. That was the only sign Sarah had that he noticed. Buck would carry the plate away with a small nod, like he was saying without words that she was still in the game. Sarah also noticed something else. Jed watched more than he spoke. When she crossed the yard with water buckets, she sometimes felt his eyes on her from a window. When she hung cloths to dry, she would look up and see him near the barn, still as a fence post, studying the day like he was looking for trouble. He never stared in a way that felt rude. It was more like he was trying to understand how a woman who arrived with nothing could carry herself like she still belonged somewhere. Sarah tried not to think about him too much. She could not afford dreams. She needed work, safety, and a roof. That was it. Still, when she made his tray, she caught herself putting extra care into it. Not to impress him, but because something in her wanted to give kindness to a man who seemed to live without any. On the 5th day, the good feeling on the ranch cracked. Sarah was in the kitchen cutting vegetables when she heard voices in the dining room. The younger hands were talking loud, thinking she could not hear. Their words started like jokes, but the tone turned ugly fast. They talked about her looks, about her being alone, about what they would do if she was theirs. Each word made Sarah's face burn. She tightened her grip on the knife and forced herself to keep cutting, because she did not know what else to do. When she walked in to serve supper, the men went quiet, but the smirks stayed. Sarah kept her head high and set plates down like she did not notice. She told herself it would pass if she ignored it. It had to pass, because she had nowhere else to go. The next morning it got worse. One of the young men leaned back in his chair and called out to her while she poured coffee. His voice was sweet in a way that meant harm. He suggested she should come eat with him sometime, and the way he said it made the room burst into laughter. Sarah felt heat rise in her chest, mixed with shame and anger. For a moment her hands shook so badly, she nearly dropped the pot. Then a voice cut through the room, low and sharp. Enough. The laughter died like someone threw water on it. The men turned their heads, and Sarah's heart jolted when she saw Jed Stone standing in the doorway. He was not supposed to be there. He never ate with the hands. His face was hard, but his eyes were colder than Sarah had ever seen. He walked forward, heavy steps on the floor, and stopped right beside the young man who made the comment. The boy tried to grin, but it faded when Jed stared him down. "Miss Hawkins is here to work," Jed said. "She is the cook of this ranch. She will be treated with respect." He swept his eyes over the whole table, one man at a time, like he was making sure every word landed. "I don't want to hear a single filthy joke," he said. "Not one. I don't want to see disrespect in your eyes either. She does her job. She does it better than most of you do yours. If any man here forgets that again, he can pack his things and leave before sundown." The young man swallowed and tried to laugh it off. "Boss, we were just joking." Jed raised his hand and the room went still again. "I don't care." A few men murmured quick yes sirs. No one argued. Jed turned to leave, then paused for one small moment. His eyes met Sarah's. It lasted only a second, but it felt like a door cracked open. There was something in his look that surprised her. It was not just anger, it was protection. Then he was gone, and the room breathed again, but it was different now. The men ate quiet and stiff. The jokes were over. Buck waited until Sarah returned to the kitchen. "He never does that," he said softly. "He never steps in for anyone. If he spoke up for you, it means something." Sarah did not know what to say. She only knew her throat felt tight. She was still afraid, but for the first time since she arrived, she did not feel alone. That evening, she made Jed's tray with careful hands. She roasted meat the way he seemed to like it, seasoned strong and cooked through. She added potatoes crisp on the outside and soft inside. Without thinking too hard, she placed a simple sweet beside the plate, a small dish made from fruit she found in the garden. It was nothing fancy, but it was gentle. The next morning, Buck returned with the empty tray and a strange look on his face. "He ate all of it," Buck said. "Even the sweet. He don't do that." Sarah felt a small warmth spread through her chest. It was not pride. It was something quieter, something like being seen. After that, small changes began to appear around her, like someone was fixing her life without asking permission. The crooked table leg in her room was straight one day, solid as if it had always been that way. The window that rattled in the wind suddenly closed tight. A second stool showed up in the kitchen, making her work easier. A new shelf was placed low enough for her to reach. Then one morning she found a small mirror sitting on her table, clean and unbroken. No one claimed any of it, but Sarah knew. Only one man on that ranch would do things like that and say nothing. Jed also started showing up more. Sometimes he walked into the kitchen and said he was checking the firewood. Sometimes he pointed at a loose board and said it needed fixing. His words stayed short, but he lingered longer than he had to. He watched her work like he was trying to understand how she moved so calm through pressure. One afternoon, he stepped into the kitchen while she was chopping vegetables. She did not hear him at first. When he spoke her name, she startled, then turned, pressing a hand to her apron. "Mr. Stone," she said, "do you need something?" He hesitated, like the words did not come easy. "I wanted to say you're doing good work," he said. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, sir. I just do what I know." Jed nodded, then glanced toward the doorway like he was already planning to leave. "The men are working better," he added. "The ranch feels different." Before Sarah could answer, he turned and walked out, leaving the air behind him heavy, with something neither of them named. That was the day the sky started to change. By late afternoon, dark clouds gathered over the ridges. Wind came in sharp bursts, carrying the smell of rain and something worse, something dry and dangerous. The hands moved faster, trying to finish work before the storm hit. Sarah started supper early, knowing they would need food before they took shelter. Then, lightning split the sky. A flash so bright it turned the yard white for a heartbeat. Thunder cracked hard enough to shake the windows. Sarah ran to the door, and her stomach dropped when she saw orange flames rising near the hay barn. The wind fed it, whipping the fire higher, faster, hungry as a wild thing. Men shouted and ran. Buck grabbed buckets. Someone screamed for water. The horses in the corral stomped and whinnied, sensing danger. In the middle of it all, Jed Stone stood still. He was close enough to the flames that the light painted his face, and Sarah saw something that chilled her more than the storm wind. His eyes were wide, not with normal fear, but with a terror that looked older than the fire itself. His hands trembled, his mouth moved, but no clear words came out. He was not leading. He was frozen. And Sarah realized in one sharp moment that the ranch might burn down, while the only man with authority stood trapped inside a memory he could not escape. Sarah did not have time to be scared. The fire was already climbing the barn walls, and the wind kept pushing it like it wanted to spread across the whole ranch. Men ran in every direction, shouting over each other, grabbing buckets, looking for orders that did not come. The horses stamped and pulled at their ties, and smoke started rolling low across the yard. Jed Stone stood near the flames like a man made of stone in the worst way. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on the burning hay, and his lips moved as if he was talking to someone who was not there. Buck rushed to him, trying to get his attention, but Jed did not react. Sarah understood what was happening before anyone said it. This was not just a barn on fire. This was a nightmare Jed had lived before. He was trapped in it. Sarah stepped forward and lifted her voice so loud it cut through the chaos. "Listen to me, all of you, right now." The men stopped, startled by the sound of a woman taking command. But they also heard the steel in her voice. They needed direction, and she was giving it. "You three," she said, pointing hard. "Get buckets from the well and keep them coming. Do not stop." She turned and pointed again. "You two, open the stable and get the horses out. Take them to the open field, far from the fire." Then she looked straight at Buck. "Buck, take Mr. Stone away from the flames. Now." Buck did not argue. He grabbed Jed by the arms and pulled. Jed moved like he was in a dream, letting himself be dragged back while his eyes stayed locked on the burning barn. Sarah ran into the main house and soaked a cloth in water, then tied it over her nose and mouth. She came back out and moved with fast steps, setting the men into a line from the well to the barn. Buckets passed from hand to hand. Water splashed against fire, hissing and steaming. The heat hit their faces like a wall. Smoke burned Sarah's eyes, but she stayed on her feet and kept shouting clear orders. "Faster! Keep it moving! Do not break the line!" The fire fought back, roaring and snapping, but Sarah did not back away. She grabbed buckets herself, threw water until her arms ached, and checked on every man. When someone started to panic, she snapped them back into focus. When someone coughed too hard, she pushed them away from the smoke and replaced them in the line. It felt like the longest hour of her life. The barn roof groaned as flames chewed through dry wood. Sparks flew into the air like angry insects. The wind tried to carry them toward the stable, but the line held. Men worked harder than they ever had because Sarah's voice kept them together, and because no one wanted to be the one who let the ranch burn. Finally, the flames weakened. The roaring dropped to a heavy crackle. Then, with one last push of water, the worst of it died. Smoke still rose, and parts of the roof had collapsed, but the fire was out. The stable was safe. The horses were safe. And no man lay injured in the dirt. The ranch hands dropped where they stood, panting, covered in soot and sweat. Sarah stood still for a moment, scanning the yard to make sure the danger was truly gone. Only then did her legs start to shake. She lowered herself to the ground, breathing hard. Her hands hurt, and when she looked down, she saw small burns on her palms and forearms. Her dress was torn and dark with smoke, and her hair had come loose from its bun. But she was alive, and so was the ranch. Then she saw Jed. He sat against a fence a short distance away, head in his hands like he was trying to hold himself together. Buck stood nearby, speaking low, but Jed looked far away. Sarah pushed herself up and walked toward him, every step heavy with exhaustion. Buck stepped back as she approached, giving them space. "Mr. Stone," Sarah said gently. Jed lifted his face. Tears were in his eyes, and the sight of them shocked her more than the fire had. This man was known for being hard. People feared him, but right now he looked like a wounded boy who had been forced to watch something terrible all over again. "It's under control," Sarah said. "The fire is out. The horses are safe. The main house is safe." Jed swallowed like his throat was locked. "I couldn't move," he said, his voice rough and broken. "I saw the flames and I went back to that day. My wife, Mary Ellen, she was trapped. I heard her calling me. I tried to get in, but I couldn't. I couldn't save her." His hands shook again, and he lowered his head like he hated himself for what he had become. Sarah's chest tightened. She knelt beside him and put a steady hand on his shoulder. She did not press. She did not pity him. She simply stayed there so he did not face the pain alone. "You don't have to fight that memory by yourself," she said. "What happened to her was not your choice. That kind of hurt can freeze a person. But look at me, Jed. Look around. You survived. This ranch survived. Today ended different." Jed slowly looked up, and for the first time Sarah saw his face without the hard mask. There was grief there, deep and old, like a wound that never closed. "You saved everything," he whispered, "when I couldn't do anything." "I did what had to be done," Sarah said, "and your men listened because this is your ranch. They wanted to save it too." Jed shook his head. "Not like that. Not the way you did. You came here with nothing, and you stood in front of fire like you owned the world." Sarah's eyes stung, but she kept her voice calm. "I came here because I needed a chance. That's all." Jed stared at her a long moment. The wind softened, rain began to fall in light drops, and the smoke drifted away like the ranch was finally breathing again. In that quiet, something passed between them that had nothing to do with cooking or work. It was the feeling of two people who knew what loss was, and who recognized it in each other. After that day, Jed changed in small but clear ways. He still worked hard. He still spoke little. But he began to appear in the kitchen not just to inspect, but to talk. He asked Sarah how she slept. He asked about her day. Sometimes he told her a story about the ranch, or about his wife, in short pieces like he could only handle a little truth at a time. One evening, long after supper, Sarah sat on the back porch looking up at the stars. The mountains were quiet, and the air smelled clean after the storm. She heard boots on the wood and looked over to see Jed lowering himself onto the porch step beside her. They sat in silence for a long time. It was not an awkward silence. It was the kind that felt safe. Finally, Jed spoke, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "When you came to my gate," he said, "and you said you weren't worth much, you were wrong." Sarah turned her head, confused. He looked straight at her. "You're worth more than you know. You didn't just feed my men. You brought something back to this ranch that I thought was gone." Sarah's throat tightened. "I only cooked," she said. Jed shook his head. No, you gave comfort. You gave order. You gave hope. And today you saved us. His hand moved slowly, careful, and covered hers on the porch step. His palm was rough from work. It was warm. I don't want you here for 1 week, he said, or even 1 season. I want you to stay. This ranch can be your home if you want it to be. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but these were not the same tears she cried on the trail. These felt like relief, like a tight knot finally loosening. She did not answer with big words. She simply squeezed his hand back, because sometimes a person's whole life changes in quiet ways. And as the stars watched from above, Sarah understood the truth that had followed her since the day she lost everything. She was not worthless. She never was. She had simply been waiting for the right place and the right moment to prove it. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. And tell me in the comments what you would do if you were Sarah, because your words